Chinese people are also watching the U.S. election, and that includes Communist Party elites. Chinese authorities pretend they're not interested, but Chinese social media tells a different story. Some Chinese quit the Chinese Communist Party with their real names. A Chinese artist tells us his journey towards taking this brave step. Outrage after Hong Kong authorities set up a crime hotline. Now residents can report on each other over any alleged violations of the so-called national security law. China put some $4 billion worth of import bans on Australia, and Australia is taking action against China's aggressiveness in the Indo-Pacific. And China's influence in the UK, it has been revealed that UK media outlet the BBC has withdrawn a program about forced organ harvesting in China due to a UK government request. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The November election has sparked excitement and strong feelings around the globe, both in the U.S. and overseas. Many Chinese people are also watching the results stream in. This as Chinese authorities try to cool things down.
Americans are not the only ones on the edge of their seats waiting for the U.S. election results. In China, all eyes are on the tightly contested race between Trump and Biden.
No matter who wins the election, there are a lot of uncertainties in fields such as the economy, which led to a volatile stock market. So I'm paying close attention to the election.
Chinese authorities feign indifference. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said on Wednesday that the U.S. election is a domestic affair. China has no position on it. Chinese media staff told Radio Free Asia that they have received notice from the authorities, asking them to follow state media sources. The notice also warned them not to translate foreign media coverage without official approval and not to inflame excessive emotions and prevent public opinion from becoming heated and sidetracked. The Chinese regime fears any rise in public emotion that can switch track and turn on the regime itself. But this doesn't mean they aren't closely watching the election. On Friday, Chinese officials were accidentally captured on camera discussing the election. Election-related news were trending high on Chinese social media. It occupied the second and seventh of the top 10 discussions on Chinese social media platform Weibo on Friday. Beijing-based veteran Chinese journalist Gao Yu said the Chinese, including Communist Party elites, are all very passionate about the election. With sparse media coverage, they turned to social media.
Because I'm on WeChat, a couple of chat groups I joined are full of second-generation communist elites. There are also some from the military, because my husband and my brother, they are both from the military. A bunch of intellectuals are also discussing it, and many of them are supporting Trump.
A Voice of America report explains that even among Communist Party elites, many are dissatisfied with the regime leader Xi Jinping's hardline approach. But now no one in China dares to speak up. They see Trump as the only one tough enough to take on Xi Jinping. Many ordinary Chinese do not have a clear preference on which candidate they want to win and just watch with curiosity.
We heard there will be protests and lawsuits coming, so I just watch for the follow-up and watch for fun. Chinese people enjoy being spectators.
Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Investors are returning to China amid the uncertainty around the U.S. presidential election. This despite Beijing suspending fintech Ant Group's IPO, which sent shockwaves into China's stock market. At an estimated $37 billion, Ant Group's IPO was projected to be the world's largest stock market listing. Investors are turning to Chinese firms as a potential Biden administration is giving rise to Asian stocks and the yuan. Many believe Biden would take less of a hardline stance against China if elected. During election night, the yuan fluctuated wildly. At one point, it fell 0.8%, hitting a one-month low. It ended at a high on November 5th at 6.64 per dollar. That's the highest level to the dollar since July 2018. Analysts say a contested election will have an impact on stock markets. The Trump administration has cracked down on Chinese firms in the U.S. Companies already listed on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ must agree to U.S. audit requirements by 2022 or risk being delisted. Chinese companies listed on the Nasdaq have come under increased scrutiny after Chinese coffee house Luckin Coffee's admission of financial fraud. Analysts say barriers for Chinese companies seeking to invest or raise money in the United States could continue, not only due to sensitive topics like the trade war and Hong Kong, but also due to China's threat to U.S. national security through technology and over concerns of China misleading investors. Now we look to China's Xinjiang region, where the pandemic continues to cause trouble. The Chinese Communist Party Secretary of Xinjiang said on Thursday the virus situation in some areas of the region remains severe, and that virus testing would be expanded. The director of the region's Centers for Disease Control and Prevention explained that the infection likely originated in a factory in Kashgar City, adding that some of the samples collected in the factory's workshops, warehouses, and bathrooms were testing positive. This factory produces leisure clothing and sportswear. A document released by Australian think tank the Australian Strategic Policy Institute reveals an interesting point. The document contains a map detailing Xinjiang's so-called re-education camps. It shows there are at least 6 camps in the same area as the factory. The spokesperson of the World Uyghur Congress shared concerns in an interview with NTD sister media, the Epoch Times, saying on top of the camps, there are also numerous detention centers in the region, and that many Uyghurs, members of a minority ethnic group, are detained there. Adding that once detainees in a camp become infected, the consequences will be disastrous. That's due to the high population density there. Over the past 16 years, more than 300 million Chinese people have resigned online from the Chinese Communist Party and other affiliated organizations. Most of them use nicknames or pseudonyms to remain anonymous and protect their safety. But some are using their real names. One of them told us why he chose to quit the party.
NTD sister media The Epoch Times hosts a U.S.-based Chinese-language version of its website. It's where about 370 million Chinese people have declared their decision to quit the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. That also includes 2 affiliated organizations, the Communist Youth League and Young Pioneers, communist organizations made for Chinese children and young people. Many of them use pseudonyms in order to protect themselves and their families from possible retaliation. But a handful of them use their real names. Chen Haitao, a visiting scholar at Harvard University, is one of them. He quit the party back in April. Chen is an artist. He also worked as a researcher at China's Dunhuang Research Institute. The institute oversees what are called the Caves of 1,000 Buddhas, a system of 500 temples featuring frescoes and murals from hundreds or even thousands of years ago. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, it's located at a crossroads of the Silk Road in northwest China's Gansu province. After coming to the United States, Chen gained access to uncensored news, a rarity inside China. With it, he learned about the brutality of the CCP's rule. His discoveries motivated him to quit the party and its organizations.
During the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, the Chinese Communist Party suppressed innocent Hong Kong citizens. It rules the land with mafia-like methods. In January, the CCP tried to cover up the CCP virus outbreak. It lied and spread the virus to the world. All of these examples gave me a more real understanding of the brutality of the CCP's rule.
Chen revealed that his awakening was also closely tied to his family. His mother has been practicing Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation practice from China, for more than 20 years. In 1999, the CCP initiated a severe crackdown on the practice. Despite the dangers of the persecution adherents face, Chen's mother stood up to clarify the lies spread by the regime about Falun Gong. She was arrested and put into a labor camp twice, for a total of 2 years. The incidents have stayed with Chen throughout his life. He said it left a big shadow over his family. At the beginning, Chen says he couldn't understand why his mother chose to stand up against the persecution.
I thought she was trying to damage rocks with pebbles. The enemy was too strong. She could never win. But last year's pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong changed me. I was deeply shocked and inspired when I saw so many ordinary citizens there, standing up to face such a brutal power, defending their freedom and dignity. I looked back at my mother and thousands of Falun Gong practitioners. I realized that their sacrifices actually have far-reaching value and significance.
He explained that the spirit of Chinese culture has disappeared in the decades of CCP rule, something he says saddens him.
Take the Dunhuang culture that I studied as an example. They are full of miracles in the temples and the Buddha statues. It's wondrous. Out of the pursuit of faith, the various possibilities of mankind to an infinite future, and the exploration of the communication between culture, art, and commerce on the Silk Road, our ancestors built a place of faith in Dunhuang to explore the eternal and realistic relationship between man and man nature, and man in the universe. Even today, it still gives us a lot of inspiration and enlightenment. Belief and perseverance have all dissipated in the money-oriented society led by the CCP.
Chen now urges people to recognize the true nature of the CCP. He says, although Chinese culture has undergone tremendous changes, there is still hope, adding that in his eyes, only when the CCP collapses can Chinese civilization be reborn. Reporting by Tang Ming, NTD News.
Now we turn to Hong Kong. Hong Kongers' freedoms took another plunge. Hong Kong police announced on Thursday a crime hotline for residents to report any alleged violations of the national security law. Beijing imposed its draconian national security law on Hong Kong at the end of June. The law punishes those who engage in secession, subversion, and collusion with foreign forces. It's already had an impact on the pro-democracy protests in the financial hub. According to the announcement, residents can use the hotline to report national security intelligence by text, email, and Chinese messaging apps WeChat and Line. Police said residents can also send images, audio, and video files to the hotline. They added the hotline does not answer calls or provide a response. Rights groups are concerned the hotline is another blow to free speech. Some are drawing comparisons to China's Cultural Revolution that swept through the country in the 1960s and 70s. Led by Mao Zedong, it was a campaign to wipe out what they called class difference. Millions were purged by authorities after friends, families, and neighbors reported them. Others say the move further destroys the freedoms guaranteed in Hong Kong for at least 50 years under the Sino-British Joint Declaration. A German think tank announced earlier this week it would set up its office in Taiwan next year. The Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom is linked to Germany's opposition Free Democratic Party. Its purpose is to promote freedom and civic education. It set up an office in Hong Kong in 2018, operating what it calls its global innovation hub from there. It aimed to promote an open society through digital projects. The foundation announced the closure of its Hong Kong office in September, becoming the first foreign non-government organization to leave Hong Kong. The move was motivated by the national security law in Hong Kong imposed by Beijing. The foundation explained it chose Taiwan because the island state is democratic, diverse, and free. The U.S. mission in Geneva is urging the WHO chief to invite Taiwan to a major meeting scheduled for next week. Talks are expected to focus on the CCP virus. Washington has been deeply critical of the WHO and its chief, Tedros, for the organization's handling of the pandemic. The U.S. says the group is too close to China and plans to withdraw. Backed by the U.S., Taiwan has stepped up lobbying efforts this year. It aims to take part in the meetings as an observer. That's after Taiwan received international praise for quickly containing the virus. The virtual meeting between the WHO's 194 member states is set to focus on the pandemic and related health issues. Drug maker Pfizer has received informal requests relating to its operations in China. The requests come from the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, units of both the Justice Department and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The drug maker said it's producing records in accordance with the requests. In 2012, Pfizer paid over $26 million as part of a settlement with the U.S. government. The company was involved in illegal payments to win businesses overseas, including in Russia, Bulgaria, China, and Italy. It is illegal for U.S. companies and foreign firms whose stock is traded in the U.S. to bribe government officials in foreign countries. China's trade war with Australia rises to a new level. It's now blocking $4 billion worth of export goods. Some say it's because of Australia's critical stance towards Beijing.
According to Chinese state media, China will place a sweeping trade ban on a growing list of Australian imports, set to take effect this week. Its total worth is some $4 billion. The ban includes Australian commodities such as sugar, timber, copper, among other goods. Chinese officials have denied that the trade blockages are a retaliatory attack against Australia's criticism of Beijing. But just a few months ago, Beijing threatened Australia with import bans. In April, Australia pursued an independent investigation into the origins of the CCP virus in China. Soon after, China's ambassador to Australia said if they do so, Chinese consumers might begin boycotting Australian imports. China's foreign ministry also told Reuters, quote, relevant companies reducing imports of relevant products from Australia are acting on their own initiative. But according to the South China Morning Post, last month Chinese officials gave verbal instructions to Chinese industrial companies to stop importing Australian goods. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation also reported that Chinese importers have received orders from the CCP's Ministry of Commerce to stop importing Australian goods in an off-the-record meeting. Australia's former Treasurer Joe Hockey accused China of using its economic power to bully Australia. In an interview with Bloomberg on Tuesday, he warned, quote, bullying never works with Australia.
Now we turn to the Indo-Pacific region and Australia. After a 13-year absence, Australia is rejoining a joint military exercise in the Indo-Pacific region. Participants include the United States, Japan, India, and Australia. It's currently ongoing and will last for around 2 weeks. The Malabar exercises are a demonstration of military power. It comes in response to the Chinese Communist regime's aggression in the region. Australia participated in the exercises only once back in 2007. That's because its involvement was condemned by the CCP. The country's decision to rejoin the exercise may be a sign that it's taking an even tougher stance against Beijing. The British Broadcasting Corporation, or BBC, is an independent organization, but one prominent lawyer reveals the broadcaster withdrew a program about forced organ harvesting in China by request of the UK government. Our UK correspondent Jane Wirrell has more.
It was June 17th last year that Sir Geoffrey Nice read out the final judgment of the China Tribunal, concluding that forced organ harvesting has happened in China on a substantial scale, with practitioners of Falun Gong probably the main source of supply, as well as evidence of mass medical testing of Uyghurs. Speaking at a China Research Group event, he said that a substantial film was prepared for BBC's Newsnight on June 17th, but it was not aired. He said a component reason was because the British government walked into the BBC and told them not to show it. Professor Martin Elliott, who was on the China Tribunal panel, added that it was deeply shocking and upsetting that the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office could pull something out from an apparently independent broadcasting organisation.
Doctors killed those innocent people.
Lord David Alton told me in an email that a reason for the FCO's involvement was presumably wanting to ingratiate themselves to the PRC. Lord Philip Hunt told NTD that he's really surprised, shocked and appalled at the thought of the government seeking to discourage the BBC from showing a programme about the China Tribunal. A spokesperson from the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office said in an email the UK government could not and would not interfere with the BBC's editorial independence. There is absolutely no truth in these allegations. They added, quote, any claims of organ harvesting are disturbing. The UK government has taken a leading role in holding China to account for its human rights abuses, and ministers raise our concerns regularly with their Chinese counterparts. The BBC did not respond in time for the airing of this story. Jane Wirrell, NTD News, London.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you next time.